Welcome back to Witch Church. It's Mal, and I am so excited to be here with Emily Tatomer, who is my fellow colleague from the Nightlight Astrology podcast. Although we just finished up our 1 year creative contract over on that channel, but we're continuing to make content together. And I asked Emily to chat with me about the nodal shift coming up in July of 2026. South Node will be moving into Leo, and North Node will be moving into Aquarius. So I thought of you, Emily. I thought you'd be the perfect one to sort of unpack this transit with me, but also we're Hellenistic astrologers, and we tend to view the North Node and the South Node a little bit differently than, let's say, an evolutionary astrologer, which I think by large is usually the understanding that people take in, right? Is the evolutionary perspective. So today we'll kind of present a slightly different perspective on that. But before we get into any of that, I want to hear about you, Emily, and I want you to introduce yourself, tell us your big three, and I want to hear too, like, what was your journey to astrology like?
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Big three, I'm a Sagittarius sun, Cancer moon, and Pisces rising. Have a Virgo stellium too, so lots of mutable placements in my chart. And I really I had always kind of loved astrology. I had those books, like the only astrology book you'll ever need as a teenager, all of that stuff. But it kind of like I skirted around it and was interested, but it was just not my main focus. And then in the very early days, probably like March 20 something of 2020 in the pandemic, one of my dear friends who grew up with astrology, her mom had followed astrology, sent me a weekly weather forecast and was like, just listen to this. And as so many other people in the beginning of the pandemic, I needed answers to life's big questions and was feeling lost. And I just kind of, something in that, listening to that weekly weather just resonated with me. And I found myself just diving in to learn. And I was reading everything that I could and watching podcasts um, and joining groups, chat groups and all of this stuff. And I had I had kind of been thinking like eventually this is going to fall flat or something about it is going to become like I'm going to become disillusioned with it or it's going to lose its glamour. But in fact, the opposite just kept happening, and I kept finding that the more I got into astrology, the more expansive it was becoming, and especially very early on, I realized that I had always pictured a year of time in the same exact way that the zodiac is laid out. And when that occurred to me, I was like, wow, this really feels like a remembering it rather than a learning. Like this something about astrology just clicks in my mind, and it has provided such a um, an avenue for finding meaning in my life that I'm really grateful for. So that's kind of how I fell into it. And then I've been studying for the last 6 years, and loving it. Yeah. And then I started with Nightlight with Adam, in 2022, studying formally. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. And it's so funny. The Pisces risings are fresh on my mind because I gave a reading to a Pisces rising last night. And we were kind of talking about how when you come into the world with Pisces rising karma, like there's something kind of inescapable about the spiritual
Mhm.
side of being human because our existence is on the one hand so material and we live in these bodies and things are heavy and we have to deal with matter and gravity and all of the material stuff, but then I feel like Pisces risings always naturally find themselves like, how do I transcend matter? How do I transcend material existence?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, since we're talking about the nodes today, my natal south node is also in Pisces in my first house. And so um I that which means of course that my north node is in Virgo. So that conversation about, spirit versus matter across Pisces and Virgo with water and earth, lifelong for me. And I had been a dancer
Yeah.
prior to having children. And for me, when I was dancing, that was my connection to the spiritual, to the ephemeral, um, yeah, to the spiritual. And after I stepped away from the dance community, I really felt that lack of having a connection to that. And it wasn't until astrology that I really felt again that connection to something spiritual and ephemeral.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And some Pisces risings have interesting stories too about religion or like the religion they grew up in. Did you happen to be raised in any sort of like strict dogma, would you say?
Not super strict, but um, definitely raised in a Protestant Presbyterian. My father in particular is very religious and relies on his faith for many, many things in life. And so I certainly grew up going to church and all of that. And largely positive. I had largely positive experiences through that. Um, but also decided when I was a teenager, I went through the confirmation process and chose not to be confirmed because I had questions and doubts about certain things. And so that was a big
Oh,
moment, like growing up of I I have always taken religion, spirituality seriously enough that I didn't want to be dishonest or I didn't want to commit myself to something if I had doubts. So yeah, it's been a lifelong kind of need to feel a connection to something like that and authentically so like it can't be fake or phony or yeah. I take it
yeah.
very seriously.
I totally get it. I totally get
Yeah.
it. I wish I had the maturity to think about that more deeply. Because when I was, I think, 16 or 17, I was confirmed, but through the Catholic Church. But it was just, I'm Italian Catholic. It was just part of the to-dos of what you
Yeah.
do in your teenage years. And I think soon after I kind of figured out like, oh, this isn't really what I believe in. But it is
Yeah.
it is interesting that a lot of us did make these like religious commitments in our youth, and
Yeah.
the adults around us didn't really guide us or let us know how big that decision is.
Yeah.
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 It's just
Yeah.
something that you do, right? That you do in certain families. Yeah, I remember quite specifically that my mom was upset. Like, why wouldn't you choose to be confirmed? And my dad was upset. And also, he said he was proud of me for like taking it seriously. Although, I mean, not to get too sidetracked, but just within the last 6 months or so, I had a conversation with my dad about that. He called me up one day and was like, I was
Wow.
thinking about it and I really want to know, why did you choose not to get confirmed? I
Wow.
think I was like 14 or 15 or something that I made that choice. And so I had this whole conversation with him about faith, and it was wild that was coming back around like however many, 30 years later or something.
Right.
Yeah. Or not that long. Not quite 30 years. Yeah, almost 30 years later.
That's so
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we got sidetracked because I think
Yeah.
astrologers always have some interesting stories, I think, about religion. And I think oftentimes even our past lives, we're astrologers in this lifetime, but who knows, we were priests, we were monks, we were religious people in past lives,
Which
and
is maybe.
which is good. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is interesting and maybe a good segue for our topic today, which is inspired by the nodes moving into Leo and Aquarius on July 26th. And before we get into the transit itself, maybe we could talk a little bit about like what are the nodes. And like I said, you and I are Hellenistic astrologers, so we view the nodes a little bit differently than maybe some astrologers in the modern ways of thinking. And that's not to say that we're right and they're wrong. I think Demetra George once at a conference said something like, someone asked her what the nodes mean, and she was like, "Oh, I don't know." It's like
I
I
love her.
actually like at my core, if there's one thing astrologers don't know, I think it's like what the nodes are about. I think we're just theorizing a bunch of different things. So I
Hmm.
wanted to make that clear that I'm a bit undecided. Like, if
Hmm.
I really do, I take the Hellenistic viewpoint? Do I take more of an evolutionary viewpoint? But yeah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, fair, totally fair. I think you're probably right about that too, about what we don't know. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I started a few months ago, I started a little local astro meetup group in my area, and one of the women who comes consistently is a practicing evolutionary astrologer. So we've had a few conversations recently about the different viewpoints on the nodes, and to hear her tell it, I think that she has used the phrase that the North Node often represents kind of our soul's curriculum. She might have been using that with regard to Pluto too, because evolutionary astrologers have a very interesting take on Pluto as well. But I think in terms of the North Node, it's like the soul's curriculum, like what we are learning in this life, like what we need to move towards the North Node, to move towards to evolve our soul so that our soul can evolve along the many lifetimes of experience that we have. Whereas the South Node is maybe old old things that we have learned in previous lives, like skills that we have already developed, that are our comfort zone that we want to kind of we naturally fall back into, but we don't need to be there anymore. Like we have already developed those skills, we've already learned that, and so the point is to move towards the North Node, that soul's curriculum for this life, and maybe step out of the South Node tendencies. And from what I understand, and she would be much more eloquent in describing the nodes from her perspective, the evolutionary perspective. And it's just so different from how I have learned to view the nodes. I don't know. What do you think about like does that ring with what you feel like you've heard about evolutionary perspective on the nodes?
Totally. I think that's a
Yeah.
great description. And, a book that I like a lot is The Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller. And
Hmm.
it's a book all about basically the evolutionary perspective on each nodal placement. Um,
Yeah.
and I really enjoy that book. I think on a personal level, it was always a little bit hard for me to conceptualize, or I guess bringing consciousness to where I was quote unquote behaving or falling into the South
Hmm.
Node behavior, and where I could consciously move forward into the North Node soul curriculum, as you said.
Yeah.
I think that for me, yeah, on a personal level, sometimes I think it's hard to bring that level of awareness to just who we are, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and I think that's why when I started learning about the Hellenistic perspective on the nodes, it's a much more malefic
Hmm.
perspective, meaning
Yeah.
the Hellenistic astrologers and to some extent in Indian astrology too.
Hmm.
It's sort of like neither the North Node or the South Node are all that great to
Yeah.
hang around for too long.
Hmm.
And that's something that resonated with me. Like, I don't want to be hanging out in the vibes of my South Node in Taurus for maybe a couple hours, but I get in and get out. And
Yeah.
maybe same with my North Node in Scorpio. Sometimes that energy does help me transform, but too much of either one can pull us into this sense of extremism. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that actually clicked with me a lot more, at least on a personal level. I don't know about you, Emily.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the thing that never quite sat right with me about that perspective is that it feels, I don't know, not to get too like penny jar words, but it feels a little like patriarchal. The idea of like we are meant to be evolving and bettering ourselves and like moving towards a higher expression. Um, I mean, I'm not advocating let's all just like sit around and be hedonists all the time. Like, yeah, let's try to improve ourselves. Self-improvement is a good thing. I'm for it, right? But there's something about the like we have to be getting better. I don't know, maybe this comes from my dance background, but there was always this like you can always be better, you can always jump higher, you can always be thinner, you can always like all of the things. And at some point it's like, well, when are we just like it's don't we have worth right now because we're a soul right now? Which is not to say I'm simplifying it. Of course, evolutionary astrologers are not saying you have no worth until you've achieved nirvana. That's not the point. But there was something about it that didn't sit right with me because it felt like it's too striving. Like, do we always need to be so striving? I don't know if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
to segue into maybe a more Hellenistic viewpoint, the North Node is striving in a sense that it's very hungry. It's a place of increase and insatiable appetite. And, at least from my understanding of how Hellenistic astrologers typically look at that North Node is it's hungry, it is striving, it wants, but it can't ever be fully satisfied. And so I think that's where we get into a little bit of, like you were saying, like I don't want to sit there too long. Then you can fall into extremes or that like that's not actually where we want to be too much of the time. Like maybe it's motivating, great, but it's
Yeah.
also it's insatiable. Like
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And, another word for the North Node is K2, which
Mm,
is the dragon's mouth.
yeah.
And this is, yeah, that way of looking at the dragon always having, like you said, this insatiable hunger. So on some level, the North Node is insatiable hunger, and then the South Node, not to be too graphic, but it's the other end of the dragon. It's like, where the
Yeah.
dragon releases and purges. And that is Rahu, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
then Rahu's the release valve, if we will.
Hmm. Yeah. So a place of release and diminishment. Um, but one thing that I will say, and this is directly from Adam Ellenboss, who we both studied under, um, is that he refers to that south node as, yes, perhaps a release valve, particularly of the material, but it is also a place, and this is similar to evolutionary, but it's also a place of like cultivated spiritual wisdom, so that perhaps it's a release valve from the material kind of like we were talking before with Pisces Virgo, like the earth, the body, the needs of the body, the material, but it is a place where we can fall back on that spiritual ephemeral wisdom that maybe we have developed over lifetimes. That's kind of a through line that that coincides a little bit with the evolutionary perspective,
Yeah,
at least from what I've heard him say, that phrase, cultivated spiritual wisdom in
I
the
love
South
that.
Node.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because like even before I started studying Hellenistic astrology, I kind of had this sense, and I think I said this on Which Church like really early on. I mean, I've had this podcast for I think over 7 years now. So like in the very early episodes, I think I said something like I don't think we're meant to throw our South Node placement out the window because why would you reject something that you're good at? And even like you said, a wisdom that has been created and collected over lifetimes. And
Hmm.
if we're in some ways really good at the energy of our South Node, I think it's okay to be in that. As long as we don't forget there's new things to learn. and
Yeah.
and perhaps when we incarnate as new souls with new life lessons, we're not meant to be good at everything. We're meant to like fail and try and
Yeah.
and make mistakes. And yeah, so I don't yeah I like the kind of that take that the South Node can be wisdom too.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess collectively, now that the nodes are moving into Leo and Aquarius, we could talk a little bit about generally, what could that mean or what would the forecast be? I guess we could also say that the nodes only move about every 18 months. So for the next 18 months, we'll have by transit collectively this influence of the North Node and South Node in Aquarius and Leo.
Hmm.
Something else we'll mention is that the nodes relate to the cycles of the eclipses. So the way I think about it is if we have the nodes in Leo and Aquarius, then we're looking at Leo season and Aquarius season as the times of the year that are containing our eclipses. And that's
Yes.
because the nodes are lunar and degrees that have to do with the moon and the moon's intersection of the what is it, the moon's intersection of
Yeah, the moon's orbit
thank you.
intersecting with the apparent orbit of the sun around us, the ecliptical line, where those two orbits intersect is where you get those nodes, those knots, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting those words to
Yeah.
bringing those words down. And yeah, I mean, generally, what's your intuition saying about that South Node K2, or sorry, Rahu in Leo and North Node in Aquarius?
Yeah, I think you know, kind of keywords. If we're talking about the South Node as a release valve, right? If that Leo is the sign that is where the sun is at home. It's a sign of leadership. It's a sign of the singularity of the sun, like the sun being the light that provides life and warmth and heat. So we might find on the world stage the diminishment or the releasing of certain leaders or public figures, or the celebrity construct too might have some release valve happening for it. Maybe influencer culture is gonna lose
Mm,
some sway, I think. Um, One of the other things with Leo is it's a place sometimes where we can find ego. So for all of us collectively, we might be working on how to release unhealthy ego, and instead finding our true authentic self and expression and heart-centered warmth and generosity. It's one thing I'm thinking for South Node in Leo. North Node in Aquarius, of course, Aquarius is a sign that is often associated with the collective, with the kind of beehive sense of humanity, of groups, of networks. And so with that North Node, that hungry, insatiable, we might find the calling in or the manifesting of um, communities and groups that are trying to rise up, that are trying to coalesce and make their voices heard, but on a like for the collective, for the good of all. We might also find, Aquarius is a fixed air sign. And speaking of, strict dogmas earlier talking about religion, is that this is the hungry mouth of the dragon. We might find that there is a little bit of dogmatic thinking that like what is best for the group is best for the group, and there's not a lot of tolerance for aberrations to that thought. So that might happen as well, that we kind of get wrapped up in a fervor about like we're gonna collectively rise up for the good of humanity, and if you don't, fall in line, then you know, the guillotine, maybe. It's like, so this both of these could be happening, that we're looking at maybe the fall of leadership, the lessening of unhealthy ego, celebrity culture, and in contrast with the rise of collective communities. But um, we need to watch for maybe getting too dogmatic or rigid in our ideas
Hmm.
about what's best. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Mixed bag, kind of mixed bag.
I love that. Yeah. And the minute you said fixed air and the dragon's mouth being in Aquarius, I thought of like AI data centers and
Yes. Oof.
just how bigger of a problem and also just sort of controversial topic it is. And anything that is controversial or presents two really extreme sides, we can think of the nodes,
Hmm.
always being
Yeah.
opposite to each other.
Hmm.
So, that's one thing I'm thinking about. And yeah, you're so right with Leo being related to like celebrity culture and even like the monarchy. And I've been
Yeah.
saying Pluto in Aquarius is the death of the monarchy, right? And then if we
Hmm.
think of the baby boomer generation being Pluto in Aquarius, now there's even more transits specifically relating to that generation's
Yeah.
charts. And I
Yeah.
think this
Pluto in,
all
in Leo, right?
Pluto
They're
and
the
Leo, so,
Yeah.
sorry,
So they're
yes.
having their Pluto opposition. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
then the nodes now going over that Pluto
Yes.
opposition. I mean, there's definitely a fall of power. And overall, I think I was thinking too about just the South Node in Leo, North Node in Aquarius reminds me of two royal figures. One being the emperor who the one of the first emperors of China who started building the Great Wall of China,
Mm.
and he had like an obsession with immortality, and
Mm.
he thought like he was going to live forever. He was going to find a way to like escape death. And there is something so shadow Leo about that. Like,
Mhm.
I am God, I am the light, I am above darkness, and I will prevail in power
Yeah.
for the rest of time,
Yeah.
and then of course death, the great equalizer, death also being Saturn and equality being Aquarius. Like that sort of
Yeah.
always comes in to fight that, maybe that part of ourselves that thinks we're going to live forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a different person who actually had Jupiter in Leo. I mentioned him on the previous podcast that will come out before this one. I did a examination of some Jupiter in Leo natives with one of my colleagues, and we examined King Louis the 16th,
Mm.
who is Marie Antoinette's husband, and he was born at Versailles. So Versailles was already built by the time he came around. But of course, there was a lot of tension between the people and royalty during his rule. And the gluttonous spending of the French royalty at that time caused a lot of um, societal unrest. And you even used the word guillotine, so we know that's where him and Marie Antoinette ended up. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mentioned those two kings, the Emperor of China and then King Louis the 16th. This sort of what happens when there's too much shadow in the Leo royalty. I'm going to live forever. I'm all
Mhm.
powerful. I'm going to do what I want. And then what does that do collectively to the people, which is more Aquarian?
Mhm. Yeah. Perfect examples.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So more of those themes coming up, although I do feel like we've been in those themes for a long time. I'm like, can we get some new
Yeah.
themes here? Like
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Pluto started entering Aquarius in what, 2023, I think. Like it just dipped its first toe in.
right.
Um, so this theme has been around for a couple of years already. I think that it's going to be augmented though, with Jupiter now in Leo and then the nodes moving into this axis as well, for sure.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because that South Node in Leo is going to be co-present with Jupiter for at least the next year. And then
Yeah.
we also will have a Mars retrograde in Leo a
Yeah.
little bit later, end of 2026, I think into 2027, or maybe it doesn't start until the beginning
I
of.
think it starts in January of 2027.
Okay.
But yeah, and so the three of them actually, because Jupiter will station to go retrograde in Sagittarius sun season this year. Um, and because it stations to go retrograde fairly close to the South Node, and because the nodes, their general pattern is to move in retrograde motion, Jupiter and the South Node are really kind of like staying fairly close together for several months there because of Jupiter's retrograde, and then Mars will join. And sometime, I think it's in like, I was just looking at this, I think it's in March of 2027. The three of them, Mars, Jupiter, and the South Node are all they're like traveling together. So that should be interesting.
For my
Yeah.
Leo house already.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of we'll get to the rising sign forecast because that Leo Aquarius axis in our charts will now be having that dragon's mouth, dragon's tail. So we have
Mhm.
that influence. But like Emily and I just said too, Jupiter and Mars have a huge influence in Leo as well in the next chunk of time. So
Mhm.
that access is really going to be lit up, and it almost reminds me a little bit of like 2020 where like all of our Capricorn stuff was lit up, and
Mhm.
for like a really long time we were like, Jesus, like can things let up in my Capricorn house? Like now we're
Yeah.
kind of moving to like the next iteration, which is like
Yeah.
Aquarius Leo. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for
uh,
sure. And then that Pluto in Aquarius will conjoin the North Node at some point too in the next year and a half, right? Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Any intuitive guidance you think you would offer, like just individuals generally through this transit? Is there like an activity or a
Mm.
certain yeah, thing that comes to mind that could maybe help us avoid the at least the personal extremism of Leo and Aquarius? Like, what can we do to maybe stay a little bit more in the middle?
Yeah, I think um I don't know, journaling, but actually what just came up when you asked that is like do some kind of activity. I don't know. I was thinking of like ecstatic dance or something, but like some kind of activity like that that gets you really like just into your heart center. I think that's like that you can let go of yeah, anything that you can do. Ecstatic dance comes to me, or like just the idea of like dance like no one is watching. Something like move your body and get warmth and get into your heart in a way that like is not performative. I think that's going to be really important. Like that's what the South Node in Leo feels like it's asking of us is like drop the performance, drop the need to like make it whatever you're putting out there like perfect and look beautiful and polished. Instead, just be like really authentically in your heart center and you know just put blinders on. Like no one, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Just get true to yourself. I don't know if that makes sense, but that feels like what we want to do is like stay in our authentic heart center. And then I think the balancing with the Aquarius North Node is like whatever you can do to maintain flexibility. I don't know, like I'm thinking breath work. Like do
Yeah.
breath work so you don't get rigid, so you don't get like stuck in, or if you're finding yourself like tunnel visioning about like because Aquarius, I do sometimes think of as the word vision can apply to the sign of Aquarius. It's like having that forward vision for the future. It's often Aquarius is like forward thinking is described as forward thinking sometimes. So it's like if you're finding yourself getting like tunnel visioned or stuck in some image for the future, like break out of that. I don't like yeah, breath work or like I'm thinking like I've never done tapping, but you know, like something like that feels like it could
Y-
just like knock you out of getting kind of rigid.
Totally, totally.
Something
Yeah.
like,
And
yeah.
like from my limited understanding about tapping, like a lot of like the physical centers we might tap are like the chest, the heart space, which is
Yeah.
Leo, you know?
Hmm.
But then also like tapping on the head feels more Aquarius.
Yeah.
And tapping to energetically release stuck emotion feels fixed energy.
Hmm.
And that's the other thing too, like these nodes are fixed. And I tend to think the fixed signs, we tend to really need to break out of something, I think, when we're having fixed sign transits.
Hmm.
Whereas when we're having mutable transits, a little bit harder to see like where we're supposed to change. We know we're changing on an energetic level, but we don't completely know where it's taking us. But then once
Hmm.
things switch to fixed, we're like, oh shit, like this is what is changing now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking like acupuncture, like get the chi flowing like that to whatever you need to do to like just
Yeah.
keep the flow happening. Yeah.
Yeah, some tai chi, some and it's
Hmm.
funny you said ecstatic dance because the minute I asked you that question, I feel like I got a vision of ecstatic dance. So
Yeah.
we're
You
on the
probably
same.
sent it to me. I
Yeah,
picked it up.
we're on the same frequency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. Let's do you feel good to get into the rising signs?
Yeah. Oh,
forecast.
let's just real quick go over. Do you want to go over dates of the eclipse
Oh
seasons or?
yes, let's do that. Let's do that first. So, and I'll put this, guys, I'll put this in the show notes. But just generally, for our rising sign forecasts for today that Emily and I are gonna talk about, I guess the time period would be more significantly this August. We have two eclipses, one on August 12th, which is a total solar eclipse in Leo. And that August 12th eclipse kind of opens up the new eclipse cycle, right? And just the fact that it's a total solar eclipse, I mean, this is definitely a strong one. And I think, those themes of the eclipse cycle for the next 18 months even will really open up, this August. There's also a partial lunar eclipse on August 27th. And that's a full moon in Pisces, technically. So we're still having a few hybrid eclipses, which is when the nodes and the lunation are in different signs. And that just happens degree wise. Sometimes it just works out that way. We won't have the nodes and the lunation in totally the same sign for some of these. And then in February of 2027, we'll have two more eclipses. And then in July of 2027, interestingly enough, we have three eclipses that month. Or I should say, basically, three eclipses, one starting July 18th, which is in Capricorn, and then two more that follow August 2nd in Leo and August 17th in Aquarius. Um,
Yeah.
so you can take Emily and I's rising sign forecasts as almost like a year ahead eclipse kind of forecast. And I would think it's especially applicable for the upcoming eclipse that's happening first, which is August 12th, 2026. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, just one more thing I'll add while I have my eyes on my notes. The eclipse cycles, is it every 9 years, 8.5, 9 years, we get the
The
same,
reversal.
the nodal reversal. So
Hmm.
I was looking into the past couple nodes in Aquarius and Leo. So this could be good for you, listener, to maybe journal about like what was happening um December of 2007 through August of 2009. That was a time period when the North Node was in Aquarius and South Node was in Leo. So, same pattern that we're going to be having soon. And then additionally, May of 2017 through November of 2018, the North Node was in Leo, South Node was in Aquarius. So
Yes.
those two 18 months chunks, which again, I'll put those in the show notes, but those are going to be a really good time period to journal about and think like, okay, what was happening in my life
Yeah.
those periods of time? And you might see similar themes coming up now for this next 18-month cycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that more recent in 2017 was when we did have that great American eclipse. If anybody remembers that, if they happen to see it or, that's a reference point. That was an eclipse in Leo, the great American eclipse in 2017. Yeah.
I totally remember that day too. And at that point, I had not officially started studying astrology. So I had no idea that the Hellenistic astrologers would actually say, don't bask under the rays of the eclipse. So now so people were
Yeah.
going out there with their glasses. And out of curiosity, Emily, do you go out and see eclipses, or are you too superstitious?
I will. I will. I will. I'm not too superstitious about that. I guess what I associate with that one though, because I also likewise was not studying astrology at that point. And knowing kind of what happened shortly after that eclipse that I associate with that eclipse, like maybe I shouldn't have gone out to see it. But no, I'm not too superstitious about it. I mean, I might say like if you are the type who likes to do like a new moon ritual or something like that, maybe don't do that on an eclipse. Like
Yeah.
don't like because eclipses are volatile and erratic and you don't know what you might be asking for something and getting it, but in a way you don't want it. So don't it's better to be in like just in receiving mode rather than in trying to like harness eclipse energy, I would say.
Totally. Maybe
Yeah.
don't drink the moon water this
Yeah.
on the eclipses or whatever.
Yeah.
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 Uh, oh, that's so funny. Cool. Well, let me I'll pull up I'll actually just pull up the eclipse in the soonest eclipse, which will be August 12th. But again,
Yeah.
we can kind of gear this our rising sign forecast to um the next year essentially.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's actually start. We'll group together Aquarius and Leo. And for Aquarius risings, you guys will have North Node in the first house, South Node in the seventh house, and then Leo risings will have South Node in the first house and then North Node in the seventh house. But
Right.
regardless, both Leo and Aquarius risings will be grappling with similar themes, especially pertaining to first house themes and seventh house themes. So, Emily, you can totally start us off with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one is fairly loud. You know, these are two of our four angular houses, being the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th angular houses. And the first house is where we find our self-identity, our character development, our body, our personality, our actual appearance. Whereas the seventh house is where we find our primary one-on-one relationships, partners of all kinds, business partners, romantic partners, clients, if you work on a one-on-one basis. But this to me feels like a year in which, and kind of punctuated during those eclipse seasons, where we're working on that polarity. Like, who am I as an individual? Who am I becoming? What am I needing to let go that is maybe performative or that is rigid in who I am and what I want as an individual, and then how I'm relating to other people. What's going on for a partner, what's going on in my relationships. I could certainly see for Aquarius and Leos, the potential to meet someone that becomes important in your life, and that can be romantic or otherwise. Um, or vice versa, the conclusion of certain relationships that had been important in your life, that could be happening here too. Something could be happening for a partner if you're partnered in some way, a new venture for them or the closing out of a venture for them. But Chris Brennan often says major new beginnings and endings around where the nodes are transiting in your chart. So beginnings, endings, shifts, just kind of themes of self and other really being accentuated and amplified over this next 18 months and most particularly over this next year, I would say. Yeah.
Totally, totally. I love that, Emily. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I know a Leo rising who is maybe thinking about becoming a parent, and that feels very first house, seventh house, like identity shift, but also the shift with the physical body.
Yeah.
That's big. I think for the Aquarius Leo risings, like how is the physical body evolving along with some of these greater shifts in life? And then I also, as a queer person, I call the first house the coming out house.
Mm.
It's where we become more authentic with ourselves, our self-expression. It's where we give ourselves a, a a new name, or we claim an identity, or
Yeah.
things like that tend to happen in first house transits. So keeping an eye out for that. And the other thing I'll just say too is, because the first and seventh house are such huge important houses, I think they tend to also affect the other angular houses, which
Yeah.
is 4 and 10, and that's our home and career, which kind of makes sense because, like, if you get married, you have a baby, then you buy a house and get a promotion. Like,
Yeah.
those things tend to come come all in at once in some ways. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go to we'll do Pisces and Virgo rising. The eclipse cycle now will be in the 12th house and 6th house. And I call these houses the both the mental and physical health houses. And I do think that oftentimes um, we're maybe wanting to grow in certain ways, but then realizing that old narratives or old identities, or even unprocessed trauma, or just things that are sort of calcified in our subconscious, are maybe holding us back from what we really want to uh, manifest, experience, create in this lifetime. So I do think that sometimes when eclipses go through the 12th house and 6th house, we heed the call of getting help for whatever we might need help with, whether that be inside a therapy room, or a Reiki healer, or a nutritionist, like someone who is able to hold space for us and really help us more on that like psychodynamic level, versus thinking like, oh, I can just click into this new thing by myself, easy peasy. Because sometimes it's not always that easy to click into a new mindset when there's stuff that hasn't been resolved. So those are some things I think of with the sixth house and 12th house. Yeah, what do you think about this one, Emily?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think, as you said, both the physical and the mental health here. I think what I'm kind of thinking for sixth and 12th is something about kind of like what we were talking about earlier, the material, the like matter and physicality versus spirituality here. I think of the sixth house as being this place of work and effort and daily habits of toil that we just kind of have to go through on the daily. Whereas the 12th is the place of like retreat from the self, retreat from the world. And so I think these questions of what am I doing on the daily, where like how am I, what are my health, like you said, nutritionists, like what are my daily health habits that are work habits, daily effort habits that need to be looked at, and maybe have something that arises that forces you to look at in the sixth house versus like where am I needing to um release from the world? Where am I needing to kind of find quiet, isolation, respite, retreat? Or where am I being forced to retreat a little bit? That feels like something may arise that's a sixth house event, like an injury or something like that, that requires you to then go on disability for a bit, and then you're you're retreating and isolating in your home, or not isolating necessarily, but that kind of thing. So these topics of what's happening in my daily habits and in my work and in my effort might arise, and then it puts a conversation around what do I need on a non-material level in order to sustain those material things in my spiritual life. So, and then when you add in the Leo Aquarius, it's again that like heart, so getting right with your heart feels important for this axis, especially, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And you kind of reminded me too, like, I think that for out of everybody, the Virgo and Pisces risings really need to like block out a few days of rest if, around
Mhm.
these eclipses, because I could just see rest being a bigger medicine than they might realize,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit of like an eat, pray, love Elizabeth Gilbert thing with this too. Like,
Yeah,
I need to
totally.
just take a weekend away and I need to get clear with myself. Because I think that's the highest manifestation of the 12th house transit. Like, how can you spend some really formidable time alone? Can you carve that time out for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. And we can go to Aries and Libra risings. We've got the 11th house of groups and networks, and then the fifth house of creativity sort of coming into play with eclipse seasons. Uh, yeah, I'm thinking about how um, sometimes creative projects do show us where support is coming in and where we don't have it. Uh, like, oh gosh, I worked on this big art exhibition gallery thing and I like invited everybody I know. And the one person I thought was always going to show up for me was the one person that didn't come. And
Mm.
there's a little bit of like who supports my dreams and who doesn't. Uh and I also think there could be just a little bit more invitation into self-focus. Now, we have to be careful with that with the South Node and all of that stuff in Leo, and it could get shadowy quick. But I do think there's some permission in choosing oneself and maybe even one's creative journey and prioritizing that, especially for some Aries and Libra risings. It could be the first significant time period in your whole life where you really are like, okay, this is my time. Like, I'm not compromising my own autonomy for anybody else. Like, I'm making really conscious choices about how I'm spending my time, and that might not be forever, but this time period of the eclipses could be, you know, calling to those kind of choices. But yeah, this is also kind of an interesting one. Fifth house, 11th house eclipses. Yeah. What do you think about that, Emily?
Yeah, I think some kind of push and pull, just, really simply between your own creative self-expression, your own joy, what brings you pleasure, what makes you feel lit up inside, with then how you're showing up in your community. There may be some conflict there between what is my community need of me, what am I asking of my community, how am I showing up there. Um, I love you saying the like who really is supporting your hopes and dreams, because that's kind of 11th housey too. It's like there may be some conflict or some push and pull, like the tug of war rope between finding your own personal creative joy and passion and pleasure and self-expression, and then what is either asked of you or what you are needing your community. Like you said, like who in your community is actually supporting your passion project, right? Who can you rely on? I also think it's possible too, if you happen to be a parent, that something may come up for a child with this series of eclipses and the nodes and these signs. Perhaps you, for sure, either Aries or Libra risings could maybe get pregnant or have a child during this sign. And then what does that do for, like, I know for myself, just anecdotally, when I had my first child, I definitely had to step back from my community. I had been part of the dance world and was out there choreographing and everything, and then I was like, okay, I'm stepping away from community to have and to become a mother. So that kind of thing could be happening, or vice versa. You could be having something come up within community, or a big dream that says, okay, that might mean that my desire to have a child or to start this next project has to be on hold. So it could be just a tension between um yeah, creative self-expression and joy, and then communities and networks, and when what they're both asking of you and what they both need to be fully expressed, and maybe one will have to give over for the other for this time being.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. Ugh. It is, see, like it's hard, when you have that tug of war going on. It's really hard to find. In tarot, it's kind of the temperance card. Like, how do I balance this, or how do I temper these two extremes? So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, okay. Well, thanks for that, Emily. And uh it sounds about right for sure. And for the Taurus risings as well as the Scorpio risings, we're looking at eclipses in the fourth house of the home and 10th house of career and public reputation. And the fourth house and the 10th house also present that tension between the public persona and then the private life. And really, this like, who am I in private versus even like the mask I have to wear out in public, even if you really like your job and you like the work version of yourself. I think there's something about the different versions of ourselves we can be inside the home and outside the home. So on some low hanging fruit level, I think we could be thinking about that for the Taurus and Scorpio risings. Um, Definitely career changes. Sometimes, I don't know why I feel called to say this, but sometimes the universe kicks us out of something because there's another better thing around the corner. Um, and if there's a job that feels really, soul sucking, or simply you're bored and you're not learning anything new, and you're going home every day to your roommate or your partner and you're complaining about it every day and it becomes like part of you. There could be this sort of moment where you realize I have to make a shift here because I can't let this become my whole identity. And yeah, there's some conscious choice maybe for some of us, and then there's other people that could feel like, oh, this really came out of the blue and I'm having a tough time accepting that my career is changing in this way. But at the same time, I think it could be really, really beneficial and be complete new beginning if you've been wanting to change career paths in a bigger way. And I think that would especially be for the Taurus risings with Aquarius, North Node up there. Not to say Scorpio risings can't also feel that career shift as well. Yeah, maybe you could speak more to like the fourth house element of this, Emily.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, in much the same way that you were just talking about a career shift, that this could be a shift with family. In particular, I was thinking in particular for the also the Tauruses with that Leo down there in the fourth and the south node. If you happen to have an elderly grandparent or a parent, um, that is not doing so well. This could be when they depart, or it could just be maybe it's a parent who is retiring too, and that could be, you know, one scenario I'm thinking of is a parent is stepping away or stepping back from the limelight, and maybe you're taking over the family business. That could very much be eclipses across the fourth and the 10th. Something like that is changing how you're showing up in the public by taking on, the family business in the 10th house because the parent was stepping back or away in the fourth. Changes in your actual physical home are possible here. Maybe you get a promotion or you get a new job, but it's in a new city and you need to, move house. That's eclipses in the fourth often can show up with moving or buying a new house or changes to your actual existing property, things like that. Different configurations. Maybe you're starting to work from home. Also, that's a possibility as well. So just reiterating everything that you said, changes in that, like how you're showing up publicly and privately, home, family, parents, and then reputation. There might be, maybe a boss is having a scandal. I don't know. Throwing through, could any of these things could come up as well. Anything to do with the public and private
Uh,
reputation and who you are behind closed doors, like when no one sees, when you're sitting on your couch with your pint of ice cream and your cat, right? It's like that, whatever is going on there is
oh
brought
yeah.
up.
Hearing you talk, I just got this like cool image of like one stay-at-home parent and the other parent that usually goes outside to work, them switching and
Mhm.
being like, hey, I really cannot be a stay-at-home parent anymore. It's driving me crazy. I need to go out there. And the other parent who's been in the office is like, great, well, I hate my job. I'm so ready for my stay-at-home era. Like that would be a cool manifestation of this eclipse.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because as you said, this is also the other two angular houses, and so will could very well show up with something in the first and seventh as well. The Yeah,
Absolutely. Like you're not moving for your job, but your partner gets a new job, and that's
yeah,
why you have to move. Like there
yeah,
could be some element of that as well. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, whew, those angular house eclipses, they're not for
yeah,
the weak.
yeah.
Ah, and Gemini and Sagittarius rising, we have third house, ninth house eclipses for you guys. And honestly, I think this is maybe the best place to be eclipsed in some ways because I think there's a lot about belief systems and our conditioning and just the narratives we've held to be true about ourselves, about our lives, that are up for release and renewal. And the ninth house tends to be a little bit more about travel, foreign cultures. The third house tends to be a little bit more about the local environment. So I could see some sort of literal or metaphorical opportunity to leave the local environment and go elsewhere to expand horizons. Sagittarius and Gemini rising certainly could be going back to school, getting a new degree, doesn't have to be in a traditional sense, though. It could be I'm going to Bali to do yoga teacher training or something like that, or I'm deciding to be a death doula. So I'm going to take classes. It doesn't have to be traditional higher education, although it certainly could. But yeah, in general, I'm struck by just this sense of releasing old belief patterns. That seems very uh, uh, I think important to keep in mind if you're Gemini or Sagittarius rising.
Yeah, and I think also and then how are you communicating about it too? It's like with that third house, like what conditioning or beliefs that are changing for you that then you need to communicate in the third house about what those are. Um, Maybe you're starting a podcast. Maybe both of these houses, the third and the ninth, might have to do with publishing or communicating, you know. So anything that you are thinking about starting, like a writing project or a podcast or a YouTube channel, could be here. Sometimes I think YouTube is in the 11th, but you know, something like that. What's being talked about? How am I showing up? How am I expressing myself? I wonder to watch for potentially um, something coming up with a sibling or a neighbor that like maybe you run into a new neighbor who's moved into into the neighborhood. You have a conversation and they talk about a pursuit that they're studying that like you've never heard of, and it piques your interest, and now you know kind of dive down that road. So it could be anything like that shifts and changes and new beginnings, or releasing old beliefs, ideas, areas of study, and then how you are um, communicating about those shifts, about those changes, what's coming up around that. Yeah, I kind of agree. Ninth and third are not so bad places to have eclipses. It's like, oh, well, maybe that's our mutable quality with our. We're like, what new beliefs can we have with both of us with our strong Pisces and Sag and everything? It's like, yeah, let's get rid of those old beliefs. Toss them. What's
Uh,
what's new?
right, right. Oh my God. And okay, you bring up the way we communicate. I just thought of something, a real life example. I know a Gemini rising who actually is starting to give professional readings now. And I'm thinking about how third, ninth house that is. And she was asking me, she was like, well, how did you start giving readings, and how do you know, how to ethically sort of deal with that exchange, because it's a really big deal to hold space for people in that way. And I told her, you should take the consulting skills class I'm teaching. Shameless plug, but I am teaching that in Chicago at the end of August through OPA. But I just think it's honestly a good example of her being like, I want to be an astrologer, ninth house, but I need to learn a little bit more about communication, third house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely, when the nodes were last in my third ninth, was when I was really diving into formal astrology studies.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Absolutely. It's when I started with Nightlight, actually, in 22 was when the nodes were in the third and ninth for me. Mhm.
totally, totally. I
Yeah.
just thought I just am finishing up with the
Yeah.
notes in my third and ninth. And
And you traveled abroad.
I did travel abroad. I had some very I had I had some interesting travel experiences that didn't always feel happy, happy, joy, joy, but always led to some really deep clarity, and also motivated some deeper life shifts. So that's what I would
Yeah.
say to any of the Gemini Sagittarius risings, that are going to travel during this 18-month period, I wouldn't shy away from travel, but the travel itself is probably a little bit more shadowy in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would watch too for maybe mentors or teachers or gurus to have some falls from grace. There might be some of that also,
Ooh, good
particularly
point.
for the Sag risings. You might see someone you admire falling off a pedestal.
Very good point. Yeah. 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 Cool. Well, we'll finish up with the Cancer Capricorn axis. And now you guys will be having the eclipses in the second house and the eighth house, which are kind of the money houses in a lot of ways. Both our income and other people's income, like our shared resources. But I'll let you start with this one, Emily.
Yeah, I think, you just said it, just kind of distilled down. These are our resource houses, right? But the second house speaks so much to resources total. So, and that is so much more than just money. It's our food, our nutrition, our time, our energy, the skills that we have that we can rely upon us to help resource us. These things are all within the second house. And then the eighth house is so much about our shared and entanglements, so the attachments we have with other people. And this also could be financial, literal, like debts, inheritances, loans, um, windfalls that come in, or it could be energetic, it could be heredity, there could be some, changes and shifts taking place with finding out information about your ancestors. This feels like an eighth house potential to me. Maybe a partner is having a change in their financial situation, and then that affects your joint resources. Anything like that could be coming up for Cancers and Capricorns, I think. Um, New skill development. Maybe you have to take out a loan, a student loan, to go to school, to a trade school, or any kind of school to develop your skills. That would be second, eighth house there. Um, or maybe you get a little inheritance that allows you to go to a trade school to develop some skills. So something like that could be happening. Um, anything like that along the second eight. How are you being resourced? And then what are the expectations that are had on you, and what expectations do you have for others? How are those shifting and changing over this next 18 months?
Yeah, I love that. Um, yeah, paying off a credit card. Um,
Mhm.
Starting a 401k, like, some of the more boring stuff of life, but at the same time, I think there's good opportunity when you're having eclipses in these houses to just like working on safety and how I don't know. Like on the one hand, money and resources are the things that make us feel safe. And then there's a deeper layer though of safety. Like if there's a part of us that is feeling unsafe, and it's like a core wound, there is no amount of resources that can necessarily fill that. So we might be speaking to a lot of our parts that might feel unsafe and making them feel safer. I think that could be something too. Generally, I've started saying this that the eighth house is the Emily Gilmore house. So the Gilmore Girls fans, Emily Gilmore's, the Lorelai's mom, and she wants a relationship with her daughter, and Lorelai asks her for money for Rory's school, and Emily says yes, but you have to come to my house every Friday night for dinner, right? So like it's such an eighth house agreement. Like, yeah, I'll give you the money, but you gotta do this. And
Mhm.
I think just being careful of agreements that we're entering. Do they really serve us? Is it worth it? Um, you know, there's energetic costs to agreements as well as monetary costs. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I love that example, by the way. I'm going to steal that.
please.
I'll credit you every time I do though. But the tying back in to the Leo and Aquarius here. Um, I just I'm like a broken record, but just yeah, getting right with the heart. So what is at the heart of the agreement, right? Like what is it really authentic
Mm,
generosity and warm, or is it performative? Is it so transactional that it loses the authentic heart value? So love that point that you made, like kind of just like really being careful and watchful and checking in with your heart center about what it is that you are signing on to do. Yeah.
totally. Gosh, should we title the episode Getting Right with the Heart?
It works with me. Yeah.
Okay. I think we found our episode title. Well, this was so awesome. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Emily, for going on the journey with me. And I'm excited to, yeah, watch this episode back in about a year and just see how everything might have come together. And
Yeah.
Emily, I'm under the impression that we can work with you both virtually and locally. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about, yeah, how to get in contact with you and things like that?
Yeah, yeah, I am definitely available for readings. Love to meet with people in that capacity. My website is my name, emilytatomer.com. You can go check that out. If you'd like to book a reading with me, I'm also on YouTube, although I have been taking a Mercury retrograde in Cancer, my fifth house of self-expression break from content creation, but I'm coming back in about a week once Mercury stations direct. So on YouTube at Emily T Astrology. And that's also where I am on Instagram. And then, yeah, locally, I live in a very small community about 40 minutes away from Santa Barbara in California, but I have a meetup group every month if you happen to be in my area. We get together just very casual, talk astrology. And I always work, there's an event once or twice a year called the Sanctuary, which is a metaphysical wellness event in locally here that I'm the astrologer, have been the astrologer since its inception for the last 3 or 4 years. So you can find me. I'm around. Find me. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, yes, and I'm sure you guys will see Emily on the podcast sometime in the future as well. And I'll have all of her links in the show notes, including to the her YouTube channel. And yeah, and besides that, yeah, I'm wishing you a very fruitful eclipse season,
Thank you.
and we'll be in contact.
Yeah. Thanks so
Oh,
much. This was a
thanks,
lot of fun.
Emily.